likes criticism? I don't see one. I don't. I'm looking real hard. I can't see a hand. Receiving criticism is a very highly personal issue, but it's also highly relevant to our growth as people and believers. Now, criticism, just that word, it kind of gives off obviously a negative connotation, but it doesn't have to be completely all negative. Criticism can be constructive. Constructive criticism are words that are meant to help someone avoid a bad outcome. If you're trying to warn somebody about something that's going on in somebody else's life and you want to spare them some of the bad consequences that they might have going down that road, that's a good thing. Or criticism can be emotionally charged, and it can be petty, and it could be based not on facts or a desire to help, but to do harm. And unfortunately, we've all met with that kind of criticism too, that sometimes people just want to be critical to be critical. They just try to poke us in a hole. And so tonight we will limit our focus to legitimate criticism or constructive criticism, based upon facts with a sincere intention to help. So when you and I receive criticism, we are faced with three choices of action. The first, we can advise the person that points out our error to mind their own business, to go jump in a lake. That's one option. Our second option is we may choose to do what comes natural and strike back with an even more scathing charge against them than they gave against us. Or we may examine the criticism and honestly decide whether the criticism, there's any valid points there in that criticism. Is there anything that person is saying in their criticism that is true and that I need to pay attention to? So that's the third option. The first two options are quite easy. Very easy. And sometimes it sounds bad, but it makes us feel good when we take those first two options, thinking that we've told somebody who is out of line with their words and we're putting them in their place. Sometimes it makes us feel good. It shouldn't, but we all know that it does. So what does the Bible say about how we should look at constructive criticism? Instruction, I guess you'd call it also. Tonight we will read from the book of Proverbs. In the book of Proverbs, God, through Solomon, provides wisdom on a number of subjects. And constructive criticism or instruction is one of those. First, let's turn in our Bibles to Proverbs 10:8. Proverbs 10:8. Proverbs 10:8. Proverbs 10:8. The wise in heart will receive commandments, but a prating fool shall fall. We read that the wise in heart are not proud, they are not conceited. They do not consider themselves above learning from others. Everyone benefits from sound advice based upon truth. And I'm sure over the years, everyone, if we had the time, we could recall of several times that somebody has gave us advice that has really helped us, either to avoid some kind of trouble or gain something. So advice is important. So everybody benefits from sound advice based upon the truth. Although some advice is more easily accepted than others. You know, sometimes when we get advice or we get instruction from people, it's hard to take. It's something that we don't want to hear, but necessarily we need to hear. And so we need to recognize the value of constructive criticism, of instruction. And conversely, as we read on in verse 8, it speaks of a prating fool. Now, I had never heard the word prating in my life, and I had no idea what it was. I don't know about you. If you've got the King James Version and it says prating, if you know what that is, you were better off than I were, because I had no idea. But evidently, prating is another word for loudmouth. And so I learned something through this, that prating is loudmouth. And so what we have here is a man foolish due to his unwillingness to learn and obey. He wants to talk, but he don't want to listen. Does anybody know anybody like that? Does anybody know anybody that wants to talk and they don't want to listen? Well, now I have heard, getting off the subject a little bit, I have heard that the reason why we have 2 ears and 1 mouth is that we're supposed to listen twice as much as we're supposed to speak. I don't know how scientific that is, but I just thought I'd throw that out there. And so this man is foolish due to his unwillingness to learn and to obey. And so his behavior is going to lead him to ruin. And I think that right there should stop us in our tracks and just help us to remind ourselves that we need to listen. We need to be willing to listen. Because if we don't, we miss out on something that somebody might tell us that will benefit us. And then we'll talk more about the benefits of that as we go on. Let's go ahead and turn to Proverbs 12:15 now. Proverbs 12:15. Proverbs 12:15. The way of a fool is right in his own eyes, but he that hearkeneth unto counsel is wise. Okay, in the words of 2014, basically what we read here is you can't tell a fool anything because he won't listen. He may hear what you're saying, but he's not going to listen. When we're dealing with this kind of person, in his pride and arrogance, he thinks he knows everything. And of course, I know that we've met people like that as well, don't we? This foolish man refuses constructive criticism. It's almost like that they think, well, nobody has anything else to tell me that I don't already know. And that's a very foolish way to think. However, as you look in the verse, the wise man acknowledges that it's impossible for one man to grasp all the understanding of everything out there. And it is, isn't it? As smart, yes. 12:15. It's Proverbs 12:15. It's all good. That's fine. So, that's fine. And so, a wise man or a wise lady, we all want to understand that we have limitations. As smart as we think we are, there's a whole lot that we'll never be able to understand. Because there's just so much out there, isn't it? I mean, even if we're an expert in one area, there are just so many other areas that we don't really have a whole lot of knowledge about at all. And so a wise man acknowledges that he has limitations. And he welcomes those who are able to come alongside of him and help him. And I think that that's one of the strengths in churches, right? Because I think that we've all been blessed in different ways. And the way that one person's been blessed is different than the way another person. And we all have things to help one another understand because one person can't know it all. And so a big part of wisdom, again, is that L word, listening. And so if you're a good listener, then chances are you're a pretty wise person. If you're somebody who likes to talk twice as much as they listen, chances are you may have problems. That's just how things are set up. Let's go ahead and look at another passage. Proverbs 15:32. Proverbs 15:32. Proverbs 15:32. Proverbs 15:32. He that refuseth instruction despiseth his own soul, but he that heareth reproof getteth understanding. So in this verse, the Lord through Solomon communicates that it is almost like a person hates their soul when they ignore instruction. Instruction is so valuable and so helpful that if somebody doesn't want it, if somebody refuses it, it's almost like they hate themselves, because anything that is good, we want, right? Anything that is beneficial, we want. And the only reason that you would refuse anything that's helpful is if you would hate yourself. So Solomon says it's almost as if somebody hates their own soul when they ignore instruction. And so this is a serious matter. When someone believes that they are above learning anything. Now, in some ways, it's kind of funny, it's kind of humorous when we think of somebody who thinks that they can't be taught anything. They think they were so smart, because it's kind of funny because it's so ridiculous, right? Because we know that that's totally impossible. But the sad part about it is there's people actually out there like that. They think that they're just so knowledgeable that nobody can tell them anything that they don't already know. And so, in this verse, it's implied that the instruction that we're talking about here is good. Is good. So anytime anybody has any good instruction for you, you need to take all you can, because more instruction is good. More instruction is beneficial. And so by refusing what is good and what benefits the person, we might compare this to a diseased man, a man who is in pain, a man who is just suffering a lot of pain, but yet when he's offered the medication that could make him well, he refuses. Now, who would do that? What sick person, if they had a cure in front of them, would refuse it? Nobody, I don't think. And so it's illogical for somebody to turn down something that's helpful. And so only a foolish and prideful man would do this. And so it's sad that too often it takes some kind of tragic accident to get through to this type of hard-headed person. A lot of times people just fool themselves into thinking that they don't need to hear nothing from anybody, that they got it all down. But you and I know that we all need one another. We all need one another. And so, while we see the foolish man in the first part of verse 32, in the second part, we read about a man who received a reproof. Now, that's not necessarily a word that we hear a lot in 2014, do we? Reproof? Well, you might say that a reproof is something like constructive criticism. It's telling somebody what they need to know. It's kind of pointing out an error that they have. And so unlike the foolish man, the second man did not take his correction in a negative way. We read that this man hears the reproof. We know that by the end of the verse, let's look at the end of the verse. The end of the verse of chapter 15, verse 32, is, he getteth understanding. He getteth understanding. So that lets me know that when he hears the reproof, then he heeds it, or he wouldn't get the understanding there at the end of the verse. So he both listened and heeded the reproof. And so the second man gained understanding. And we could all use a little bit more understanding, couldn't we? I know I could. And the foolish man, he was offered this understanding, and he denied himself of that understanding. And so depending on our perspective, we have a choice to make. We can either benefit from constructive criticism, how much it may hurt sometimes. And sometimes it stings because we all want to think the best about ourselves, and sometimes we get our feelings hurt when somebody points out things about ourselves that we don't really feel so good about. But we can either benefit from constructive criticism, or we can choose to deny ourselves the benefits that may come from this constructive criticism. So we all have a choice. Do we want to benefit, or do we want to deny ourselves a benefit? Really, when you think about it, it's a pretty easy choice, right? Either to benefit or deny ourselves from benefit. I'll choose benefit. And so you may say, well, you're talking all about this criticism. Well, I don't like any criticism, whether it's constructive or otherwise. I'll do things my way, and you do things your way. I understand that. But many times you and I can't see the dangers of our behaviors, can we? For instance, if somebody was in the forest somewhere and you knew the forest better than they did, and you know that there was bear traps around, and wouldn't it be awful if you didn't warn them that there were bear traps around? Sometimes, if we know something that somebody else may not know, we need to share with them so that they'll have the benefit of that, and then they could avoid a lot of trouble. And it's not that when we do help people, we do advise people, we don't want to do it in an unloving way, do we? We want to do it in the same way that we would like it shared with us. But the fact of it is people help one another. And it's good that people help one another because not one person can see everything around them. We all have limits. And if one person sees something that I don't, that could benefit me, and they'll tell me, I think that's great. And so sometimes being humble and listening to what somebody else has to say for your benefit, it could even save your life. As I was talking about the example of the bear trap or any other danger that somebody might go into. If you can warn them about it and they'll listen to you and they'll heed what you say, that can sometimes save a person's life. And so again, I don't want to say that constructive criticism, however well-intentioned it can be, sometimes it'll still hurt. It'll still sting. When somebody points out something about yourself that you just, it hurts because we all have feelings. We're not robots. When somebody says something to us that kind of makes us feel self-conscious about ourselves, it hurts. But what we need to do is we need to, as much as we can, we need to evaluate what's being said. We need to evaluate whether it's based upon truth, if what somebody's telling us is actually true. And then we need to think, well, are they right? Would it be beneficial for me to try something to improve myself in that area? And so, if it's based upon truth and it's meant to help, you and I should listen. So who knows? If somebody gives you some advice, if somebody instructs you, if somebody gives you constructive criticism, it may save you from embarrassment sometimes. It may save you from injury possibly. or it may save you a buck or two down the road. So as believers, you and I need to humbly listen and obey the Word of God. So if we humbly and obey the Word of God, then we'll be open and willing to hear truth. Because God is the author of all truth, right? And sometimes God works through other people to speak to us things that we need to know. And sometimes it might be strangers. Somebody might just come up to you and tell you something that you need to know, and you don't know them from Adam. God works like that sometimes. And so when people tell us something that they feel we need to know, and it's in truth, and it's given in the right way, we should not turn a deaf ear to that. We should not be like the foolish man in the verses that we read. But we should be like the wise man, welcoming truth and evaluating what we're told and seeing how we might improve in light of that truth. And so I thank you for your kind attention tonight. And if I could ask Con to close us in prayer, please.